we were advancing, and we went forward. The lieutenant was pushing us forward and pushing us forward, and we went up across the open field. There was a building on the right of us, I remember, and Charlie was in the lead, and I came behind with the BAR team. And I don't know just how Charlie got hit, whether it was with a machine gun fire or if it was a sniper bullet. But he was hit, and I know he went down on his knees, and I know he was praying. And I know that, and I think he said something to Santa Maria or something like that. I think it was Catholic, and I think he was praying in that respect. And so I came past that. I said, "Are you okay, Charlie?" But he didn't answer, and I could see that he had a mortal wound. But I hollered for the medic, which was a PFC Mihailovich, and he came over, and I went on. I mean, because you can't stop and take care of the wounded. You got to keep fighting. So I had my BAR team, and we were firing through the hedgerow, across the hedgerows and stuff, until we got over, and there was no support. Because I had told the lieutenant, I said, we better get some tanks up here, or get some artillery support or something, because I said, they've got machine guns and mortars over there, and I said, and they're well defended. We got to get some support. Keep going, keep going, keep going, he said. And so we got up against the hedgerow till we run out of ammunition. We had no ammunition left. I threw all the grenades I had. I even had some white phosphorus grenades. I had a grenade launcher on my rifle. I even fired those over, thinking that maybe if they could get air support or something, they could tell where the Germans were located, so that they could come down straight from, or at least make them withdraw. But when we ran out of ammunition, we couldn't fire anymore, so the Germans closed in, and I remember this German lieutenant racing up just above the hedgerow and spraying with his machine pistol, and there was nothing for us to do but to give up. So there was Chalmer Thompson, which was the machine gunner, Melvin Peebler, which was the assistant gunner, and Private Work, which was the ammunition carrier, and myself, that were captured at that time. The lieutenant took off. We don't know what happened to him. I thought maybe he got killed. I don't know, because they were just picking them off one right after the other. And so we were captured, and then they took us back and, of course, processed us through the PW, through the American International Red Cross. We're registered, and we went on to be prisoners of war, the first platoon.
Do you know roughly when that was?
It was down in I've forgotten now whether it was in Ojai, California, or whether it was in Fort Rucker. I know I was only a corporal just a short time when they rearranged the status in the ranks in the Army and made assistant squad leader sergeants then. So I was only corporal just for a few months, and then I made sergeant right away. So and then from Fort Rucker, we went up to Tennessee. We were the first division to have winter maneuvers in Tennessee, and that was a muddy mess because the snow and everything melted, and it's not really that cold there, but it was all muddy. We had to walk and march up and down these roads and stuff, and about knee deep in mud. And I can remember eating Thanksgiving dinner, pouring down rain with my raincoat or my poncho over my head like that, holding my mess kit like this and trying to keep the water out of my food. So then after that, after we finished the maneuvers there, part of the company was sent home on leave. I got to go home on leave from there, and then joined the unit. All moved to Camp Butner, North Carolina, and we trained there then. And from there we went up to part of the unit went up to West Virginia to Champs Rocks. It was Champs Mountains, and practiced mountain training. And from there, then we went back to Butner. Marshall moved up to Camp Kilmer, and then on board went overseas. And the ship that we went over on was the USS A. Anderson, and we were the flagship of the convoy, and it was a tremendous big convoy, just ships everywhere. But we were the flagship. We were the one that's controlling the thing. So the convoy could only move as fast as the freighters, which were carrying supplies and things to go to England, because they could only move just as fast as they could. We could go much faster than that, because I remember something happened to the propellers or shafts or something, and we had to slow way down. And I know we were clear back at the end of the convoy before they got it repaired. And once they got it repaired, boy, they boosted up those engines, and I mean, we moved and went up into the center of the convoy again where we were supposed to be as the flagship. And then we zigzagged across, and of course, submarines got a couple ships. And
did they really?
Yeah, and these little destroyers that, I mean, those things could just sit up in the water, I mean, and move, or they would go out and drop these depth charges. And so I don't know whether they destroyed the submarines or what, but that was the only attack that we had. We did lose a couple of ships. So then we went on to England, trained over there, and practiced our combat training and stuff. And then, of course, then when D-Day come, why, everything blossomed up, and then we went into France in Omaha Beach. I went back there in 1955 and went on Omaha Beach, and they were still, 10 years after the war, they were still salvaging the landing craft and tanks and stuff that were destroyed on the beach, and they were clearing up the beach. They were still clearing this stuff out. The salvage companies were still clearing this stuff out. And so then I went on over to Valais-Fassard, where we had gone into battle, and walked over the battlefield and everything that was there. So it was real sad to go over that again, but it was part of the war, and we were part of it. So.
Was it kind of cathartic for you to go over the battlefield again? I mean, to help you to
Well, not really.
No.
It just brought back a lot of memories and things, and it was just so sad to see the area where we lost all those men. And I felt needlessly, I don't think our officers or our intelligence realized how many Germans were set up in their defensive positions. I think they just underestimated the German defenses. And in those hedgerows, it just one fortress after another. I mean, they had their defenses set up so good that the hedgerows, they dug their foxholes and things in the length of the hedgerow, and then just like cut a small hole through that they could fire through, you know, and you couldn't see them. I mean, they were just, with this smokeless powder they had, you just could not pinpoint where they were firing from, you know, to counterfire. So about all we could do would be to spray the area, you know, hoping to hit them or make them withdraw or something, you know. And so that's what we were doing when Charlie got hit.
I know you climbed out of the ditch, and you climbed out of that deep ditch, and then you went...
Yeah, see, in between these fields, there were like, these ditches were 5, 6 foot deep. And they were real wide. In fact, as you could drive wagons or vehicles down these ditches. And they were so deep that you couldn't crawl up out of them, really. In fact, is when we moved forward, Charlie went up first. He had help to get up, and I went and helped each one of our men get up over this. And then this lieutenant was there too. He helped me get up, and then I helped him pull him up. And then this was a complete open area into the next thing, and it was about almost a block, I would say, across this field, and wide open. And all the machine guns and artillery, they were just devastating. And just the snipers were picking off our men. And Charlie got up to the hedgerow. And I'm not sure whether he looked over the hedgerow and got shot with a machine gun, or if a sniper hit him. But when I saw he was hit, I went over to him, and he was doubled up on the ground like that and praying. And it sounded like he said Santa Maria or something like that. And I said, well, are you okay, Charlie? And he just kind of just fell over. So I called the medic, which was Mihailovich, was our company medic. And he came over, and of course I went on. I mean, I couldn't stop and take care of any wounded. I had other men. So I moved back down the hedgerow, and I looked up over the top, and I was trying to see through, and I come back down, and PFC Jones, Ralph Jones from Kansas City, was right behind me. He said, "What did you see?" I said, "Well, I didn't see any Germans," and so I kept moving. So he looked up over top of the hedgerow, and when he did, he got shot right in the eyes. I was just a second that close, or I would have been the one that got the shot. So we moved on down, and we kept firing, and Chalmer Thompson was the BAR team. I had the BAR team, and Chalmer Thompson was the gunner, and Melvin Peebler was the assistant gunner, and then Private Work was the ammunition carrier. And so we moved on down, and we would raise our guns up over the top of the hedgerow and fire into the next hedgerow, because there were Germans back there. And I had what they call a grenade launcher on my rifle, and so I took my grenades and put them on the launcher and fired all of my grenades. In fact, as I had two what they call white phosphorus grenades that you could use for smoke or to start a fire. So I fired those two over is in the direction that the Germans were, and I thought, well, if they did call for aircraft support, that they would know where the Germans were. They could come down and strafe them, or it would serve as a point for the artillery to fire, or our mortars, so they could direct the fire in that direction. But we were out of ammunition, and so we were just there against the hedgerow, waiting, for reinforcements to come up, and help us, or relieve us, or get some tanks, because I told this lieutenant, I said, get some tanks up here, or some artillery or air support or something. I said, these machine guns are wiping us out. So he said, well, you hold them in here, and he took off. And so I don't know whatever ever happened to him. I never saw him after that. I thought maybe he got killed or something. I don't know. But I understand he made it through and finally became company commander, and now I understand he's a brigadier general, retired. So maybe he learned, but he was sure inexperienced when he was leading us, and I've always felt kind of bitter towards him for not waiting, or or something, because he was very aggressive, and I think he thought he was going to win the war by himself, see, and as he did, he lost his whole platoon. And but the four of us were captured, and Thompson was wounded. He had wound in his leg. Fact is, after we got over the hedgerow, we had to carry him. I carried him on one side in this private work. Carried him on the other side of him, and they took us on back into like a collection area back there, and they took him to a first aid station, and I was wounded. I had shrapnels in my hands, and I had lost the hearing in this ear from the artillery and mortar shells, and so I could still walk and everything, so I wasn't injured in my legs, but they took Fiedler at work, and I back with 3 guards took us, and we started on back to the processing, and went on back, and they interrogated us, and they put us at a collecting point with there must have been 75 or 80 other prisoners there too. And so they processed us on back and rode in those stupid 40 and 8 trains, barbed wire over the windows and everything, and took us back to Stalag IIIC, and that's where we were registered with the Red Cross, International Red Cross, and given our little POW dog tags. And we wore these along with our regular dog tags, because that was the number that we were registered with as prisoners with the International Red Cross. And then it was just a matter of going from one camp to the other and traveling on the trains and everything until they finally took us back in my group to through Berlin. And I can remember in that railroad yard, we were sitting in the railroad yard in Berlin when the planes came over and bombed Berlin. And so, of course, we're sitting there and praying that they don't hit our train. Well, luckily they didn't, and the next day, they moved us out, and we went to a town called Christine. It was Alt-Dreiwitz is the actual little town where our POW camp was, and that's where my final POW camp was, in there. But this was Stalag IIIC at Alt-Dreiwitz, and there were about roughly 2,000 American prisoners there, and there were 2 compounds, about 1,000 in each one. Then there was a Russian compound that had, I don't know, several hundred Russian prisoners in it also. But that's where I stayed until the Russian spearhead came in and liberated the camp. And we could hear the artillery and the firing and things, and some planes coming over, and also the German guards started to move us out of camp. We tried to stall as long as we could. We didn't want to leave the camp, and we kept milling around and trying to stall as long as we could, because we didn't want to go out of the camp. But they forced us out, they marched us out, and they'd always line up 5 abreast so they could count them easily, see 5, 10, 15, 20. They could count the prisoners so to see if any didn't escape. And they marched us out, and we went out about roughly a half a mile, and the Russian artillery fired a round into the column, and there were several prisoners killed there, and one of the men He was up in the lead area, ran up with his hands up to the Russians and told them Americans, you know. And so they didn't fire anymore. They just fired the one round. So then the guards took us back and moved us back into camp. I don't remember whether they just told us to go back or whether they took us back. But anyway, we all got out of there and went back into the POW camp. So when we got back in, here comes a couple of tanks up the road. The one pulls up in front of the gate and stops. The turret goes up, the lid goes up. Here there's a Russian woman that's in charge, that was in command of the spearhead, in black uniform and everything, and a couple of our men could speak Russian, so they talked to her and everything. She said, well, you stay in the camp, because she said we're moving forward with the spearhead, and you stay in here and don't get out. Well, a lot of us wanted to get out and maybe fight with the Russians to get on, or at least follow them and go back so we could get back to the American lines, because we knew the war was getting close to the end and there couldn't be that much more, you know. But they wouldn't let us. So they made us stay. And then we were there 2 days, and then on the third day, they got us all together and told us we were going to move us back to Poland. And so we all had to get out and got our stuff together, what food we had and clothes and stuff, and then moved us out at night and started us back to Warsaw. We were supposed to go back to Warsaw. Well, we had to live off of the land because they didn't give us any food. And there's about 90 kilometers from Krystyn to the Polish border. And in that 90 kilometers, which is about 50 some miles, I saw 2 live Germans. All the rest, they killed everyone, men, women, and children. And at night, the sky was just ablaze with fires, where the Russians set fire to their homes and barns and stuff like that. Just did the same thing to them, I guess, that the Germans did to the Russians when they went into Russia. And so we finally got back, and fortunately, I did not smoke, and we get a Red Cross parcel every couple months, and in there's Red Cross parcel, there was food and 5 packs of cigarettes. So I didn't smoke. So I took these cigarettes and traded them to the German guards for food and everything. And going back to Poland, we got a ride with one of the convoy trucks that were bringing up supplies and stuff. They would dump them off, and then they would go back empty. And Studebaker trucks. The Russians were driving our Studebaker trucks. we lend lease to them, see. And I gave the driver a pack of cigarettes, and he let us ride back. And so we got a ride about, roughly 45, 50 miles that we didn't have to walk. And when we got back to Warsaw, why, they had a collecting point there for us, and the food, all we got was a bowl of, like, I don't know what you'd call it, porridge, or it was like oatmeal, but it was made out of wheat, and very tasteless and everything, but it was, at least had some food value to it. But so I and 2 other sergeants decided to go out into the Polish community and see what we could find out about the war, because the Russians weren't telling us anything, to see if we could find anybody that could speak English and give us any information about the war. Well, fortunately, we ran into a woman that could speak English, and she said she knew a Polish or professor from the University of Warsaw that she would take us to him. So she did. She took us to his house, and he could speak English fluently. And I don't know what role he had in the Polish underground, but he was part of the Polish underground because he got us in with the Polish underground. And they took us out in about, I don't know, must have been 15, 20 miles from Warsaw into this underground headquarters. And we had a much better time there because they had food and everything, and so we could get our strength and everything back. When I was captured, I weighed about 185 pounds, and when I was liberated, I weighed 127. And I spent 3 weeks in the German hospital. But anyway, back to the underground. Now they kept us there. We were there with them about 6 or 7 weeks. But we were with them about 6 or 7 weeks, and our food, I mean, was real good. And they showed me a chest about approximately 2 feet long and maybe 18 inches wide and about 18 inches deep, about 2/3 filled with gold coins. And they said that the U.S. government had given them this gold to sabotage the Germans, the German army and stuff. And also I saw sacks and stacks of $100 1934 Federal Reserve notes, American money. And this was all given to the underground to destroy as much of the German defenses as they could. And so when we got ready to leave there, they took my trousers and sewed gold coins in the band of my trousers all the way around. And so we used these to bribe the Russians and to get across the border and to buy food and everything to get back. So they guided us down to the border and to Czechoslovakia. And we went across into Czechoslovakia and we walked. They told us to follow the railroad tracks that went into Prague. So we did, and we followed them, and we spent several days walking, because we weren't that strong, and I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 miles a day was the most that we could walk. And finally, we got to a station where there was a train, and we got on this train, and we had to bribe because the Russians had charge of the train. And so they took our gold money, they took our gold coins, and moved us on into Prague. Well, when we got into Prague, we got off of the train, and as soon as we got off of the train, the Russian guards, soldiers, took us, and they put us in jail. They was down in prison. I thought, oh man, nobody could speak Russian. I said, wow, I wonder how we're going to get out of this one. So we stayed there that night, and they did give us some bread and like butter on it. And so the next morning, nobody was around except the Russians. And about 10 o'clock, here comes in an British officer, a British major, who was an Australian in the British Army, that was a liaison officer between the Russian forces and the American forces. He comes in and says, "Hi, you Yanks." I could have kissed him. But I said, "How do we get out of here?" I said, "They put us in jail here." I said, "And are they going to charge us with something or what?" So he said, "No." He said, "Just sit tight." He said, "I'll have you out of here in a little while." So he left in about 2 hours. Here he came with some kind of documents, and they released us, and he took us out and put us on a lorry, which is a truck, and a flatbed truck, and took us over to Pilsen, which was the dividing line between the American forces and the Russian forces. And so he took this paperwork and everything up there, and they raised the gate, and we went on through, and all of those pup tents on the side of that mountain just looked like heaven. So we were back with the American Army then, and they questioned us. We had to make out reports and things, you know, what we saw, what we did, and what the Russians were doing, because they stole everything they could haul away, both from Poland and from Germany. Anything that they could break loose and load on trucks or load on trains and take it back to Russia, they took it. They stole everything. And so then we were there for about a week, and they sent a plane in, and they flew us from there back to Reims, France, which was a processing center, and gave us new clothes and deloused us and everything, and sent us down to Camp Lucky Strike, and we were there about a week, and then got on board a ship and back to the United States. And we're back in God's country again.
There's about 400 questions I was going to ask you, but let me just ask you a couple. One is, when you guys moved out of the ditch towards the hedgerow, how many men were with you? Was it a squad or?
No, it was a whole platoon.
Whole platoon?
Yeah, the whole platoon, because Sergeant Cantoni was farther over to the right of me, probably 75 yards, 50, 75 yards at least, and he got hit also. He got killed there, and the other men, I mean, they were just picking them off. The snipers were so positioned apparently that they could, just pick us off, you know, one right after the other, until we got up against the hedgerow. Once we got up there, then the machine gun fire and everything was intense, and I was never really quite sure whether it was our mortar shells or the German mortar shells that were coming in right in on top of us, and because you couldn't tell from the explosion, or at least I couldn't from where I was, to tell which direction they were coming from. And with that much firing and everything, and that much noise and everything going on, you just have no idea what's going on really a lot of time. But when that lieutenant took off, we were just like abandoned. I mean, we were there, just the four of us was all that was left. And so when this German lieutenant up over the top of the hedgerow and just sprayed the area with his machine pistol, I mean, we had no ammunition. We couldn't resist the things, so all we could do was surrender. And why he didn't shoot us, I don't know, because he could have very easily. But maybe his orders were to capture some of us if he could, to find out what units and everything were there. I don't know. But anyway, up on our hands and over the hedgerow we went. He was real solid sergeant. He was really good. He was good with his men. He had good control of them. His in training and everything with it. He was an outstanding sergeant. He was real good. Yeah, I was glad to serve with him, because he was real responsible and sensitive to their needs, and just was just a darn good Army sergeant. He was real good. And there weren't that many Italians in our unit. Fact is, the only two that I really know that were Italian were Charlie and Cantoni. And I think all the rest, a couple of them were what they call bullhunks from South Omaha. And Tomchek was one of them. He was a sergeant and not really, I hate to say intelligent, but not really cut out to be a sergeant. And he was killed over there, I understand. I think it was, I don't know if it was Corporal Peterson or one of them was telling me that he just walked up and was walking just up, without any regard, and they told him to get down, and he just froze. And of course he was shot and killed. But he was not really NCO material. But he was part of the company and came on active duty with the Guard. He was in the Guard and served with them up until he got killed.
When did you join the unit, the 134th?
I joined the 134th. Well, I was assigned initially, since I had 2 years of ROTC, I was considered trained military, and I didn't have to go through basic training. And I was originally assigned to the 164th Infantry, which was South and North Dakota National Guard. And so when I enlisted, after they processed me, gave me my shots and stuff, they sent me out to California. And when I got out there, it was about 5 o'clock in the evening, and the 164th Infantry had left that morning to go up to Oakland to load on ships and going to the Pacific. So I missed that unit. That unit landed on Guadalcanal on October the 12th, 1942, and I think there were about 10 or 12 men that came back from that unit. So I was that close again. So I went over to post headquarters and said, well, the unit's not here. What am I supposed to do, And they told me to sit tight, so they kept me a couple days there, and then they cut orders and assigned me to the 35th Infantry Division. And the division assigned me to L Company, which was out on Catalina Island. And so they attached me then to M Company, which was just down the road a little ways at Gaviota Beach, and I was attached to them until L Company came back from Catalina Island. And then I joined my unit at Gaviota, and that was, that must have been around about July or maybe early August, early part of August in 1942, that I actually joined the company. I was assigned to them, but I was living with the M Company, attached to them. So, and so then we walked up and down the beach and guarded the Pacific Ocean. Trained in the desert out at Ojai. Every Sunday, we had a parade every Sunday. And of course the civilians all came out, and thought, boy, that's beautiful, that's great, see this parade and everything. And our headquarters was in the golf course, the clubhouse in Ojai, California. And of course we were living out in tents. We had tents set up on the golf course. And, so we stayed there until after we trained there. Then we went down to Mines Field in Los Angeles, which is the Los Angeles Airport. And we were guarding the airplane factories, North American, Consolidated, Johnny Northrop, and the pilots. They bring the pilots in bus loads, and when the planes were completed, manufactured, why the pilots go in and take them and fly them off. See, Well, we got to see the air shows and everything else, see the P-38s and, and the P-40s and the P-51s and the B-25 bombers and all were all manufactured right there. So we were guarding this. And from there, then, why, they put us on the train and sent us down to Camp Rucker, Alabama. And from there, we went from there to Tennessee maneuvers and then.
Mr. Markworth, you told me about a patrol you went on a couple days before.
Yeah, Greenleaf, Lieutenant Greenleaf sent me and two other men out. It would have been to the right flank of our company or our platoon on patrol, both for security and to see if there were any Germans out there, and so we went out. I don't remember. It was a good 100, 150 yards, maybe 200 yards. I don't remember exactly, but it was over quite a ways, and set up a kind of a listening post and was observing any movement or anything. And here there was a German patrol we could see coming towards us. So we just sat tight and let them walk almost up to us. And then we hollered, halt, you know, and they dropped their guns and put up their hands, and I don't know what they were hollering, don't shoot, you know. And so we held them there until it started to get daylight, and then we brought them back to the company headquarters, and Captain Lassiter sent them back to S2 for intelligence. They wanted to question them to find out, I guess, you know, what was out there, where they were located and everything. But we captured the patrol.
When they asked you to go out on patrol, what was your first thought?
What do you mean? When?
I mean, my first thought would have been, why me?
Well, we had been up all night. I mean, I was concerned about staying awake, but we didn't have any trouble staying awake. Not out there. And so at least we contributed something that day, and then, of course, on the next day we went into battle again, and later on the 17th I was captured. Yeah.
So that was you were in combat for 3 days.
3 days, yeah.
Before you were captured.
Yeah. Third day I was captured.
Was it pretty intense, both the second and third day?
It wasn't too intense the first day, but the second day was increased, but the third day was just devastating. As Lieutenant Greenleaf just pushed us so far forward that we should have held where we were, called for tank support, or got some artillery or something in there to destroy their positions or make them draw back. But he didn't. He was going to win the war by himself, I think. I always thought a glory hunting lieutenant. I mean, he lost his whole platoon there. I like that statement in there that there were no prisoners taken in L Company. He was full of, you know what.
Did you show that?
Huh?
Did you show that letter?
No, I didn't show that letter. Greenleaf.
Your buddy.
My buddy, yeah. My buddy. I guess he turned out to be a good officer after he learned how to be a lieutenant. I guess he went on, I understand, to be company commander, and went on up the line. I guess he retired as a brigadier general.
Yeah, but he was altogether different for first. He had to be, no. He turned out okay, but boy, he come up with crazy stuff sometimes.
He just didn't impress me as an officer at all. Out in California in 1942, and then stayed with them until like Joe. I mean, I like Charlie. He was good. He was a good NCO. He led his men well. He was understanding and took care of his men. He was a good sergeant.
What do you think about that letter? I didn't hear the background to it. I just saw it.
But Charlie had written to him to find out, I guess, information about Charlie, and that's what he came back with.
What's his story about when he was killed? Is that?
No, he said there were no prisoners taken in Alcombe.
Oh.
You're looking at one.
And there were 4 of us,
Yeah.
my BAR team and me, that were captured.
Yeah.
So
Did you make it back?
he obviously didn't know what was going on.
Yeah. Was
Was you captured on the 16th of July? That would be 17th. Or didn't he say something about the 16th?
that thing about
With Charlie?
where he was or what he was doing?
Yeah, well, Charlie led the squads up, and we were in combat. He led us across this open area, and they were just picking us off one right after the other. Well, Charlie got up to the hedgerow that was on the end of this open area, and I'm not sure whether it was machine gun fire or a sniper that hit him. But I was probably 45, 50 feet from him when he was hit. And he dropped down on his knees and was kind of bent over. And I went up and I said, "Charlie, are you okay?" Well, he didn't answer, but he was obviously praying. I think he was something of Santa Maria or something like that. I heard him speak, and then he just fell over. So.
Did you know this by Tally?
Yes, I know him. He was in the 3rd Platoon, I think. I was in the 3rd Platoon initially, and I was an assistant squad leader in the 3rd Platoon. And when I got my stripes, when I got to be corporal, they moved me from the 3rd Platoon over to the 1st Platoon. So then I was in Sergeant Cantoni's platoon.
Now, that's not true what he said in the letter about Chuck and Tilly having.
No, that's true. That's true about Charlie, but it's not true that there were no prisoners taken. So he said there were no prisoners taken in Alcombe.
So they shot him while he was trying to surrender? Is that what?
No, he didn't. No. He said that. He said in there too that was not true. No, Charlie was not trying to surrender or anything.
That didn't sound like the stories I had heard.
No, because we were still fighting. We were still shooting. I mean, until we ran out of ammunition.
When you were captured, you were in about the same position as you had been the day before. Is that right?
Yeah.
And
Well, no, we had moved up farther towards St. Lo from the day before. We were, probably, I guess, 2 hedgerows? I guess there were 2 hedgerows up from where we were the day before. And then we had to go through this well, I call it a big ditch. It was actually, they could drive a vehicle down through it. It was on the sunken road, I guess you'd call it. We had to climb up out of that and go across this open area. The fact is, I had to help the men get up over the edge of it. You couldn't get enough over there. In fact, this Lieutenant Greenleaf helped me get up. And then I grabbed his hand and helped pull him up, and then we kept moving forward then up towards the hedgerow. And that was, I don't remember, I think that field was probably,
I was really hoping.
I don't know, what was 7,500 yards wide maybe. And I know there was a building to the right of us, no windows or roof or anything on it. I mean, it had been abandoned by the Germans, but I remember that, and we were firing into the hedgerow or something. I mean, because you couldn't see them, you just had to anticipate where they were and shoot, you know, hoping to hit some of them, because they were so well camouflaged in those hedgerows and so well dug in that you really couldn't see where the firing was coming, because they had this smokeless powder, and you couldn't see where the blast or the smoke was coming from. Where ours, when you fire our rifles, you could see the smoke, you could see the shell and everything, but they, being in a defensive position, of course, had the advantage, and they were well dug in.
So Charlie was killed in that first field after the ditch,
Yeah.
and then you moved up 2 hedgerows.
No, he was killed in the first hedgerow, and we moved up one more.
Oh, I see.
But that's as far as we got.
Do you know roughly what time of day you were captured, or
You can't sneak up to
Or
here
he was
because
killed.
then the guy over in this corner can shoot across. You can't sneak up this way.
I know you don't
I
look at your
don't
watch.
remember exactly. I didn't.
Afternoon, evening, morning.
I would know. It was in around. I don't know. It must have been around noon, 1 o'clock, maybe 2 o'clock.
That you were
something like
captured?
that. Yeah.
You don't have to know what time of day he was killed, do you?
Yeah, about.
So
I would think it would be around 10 o'clock.
get in there and support you and start
10, maybe 11 o'clock. I'm not sure, because we went into combat in the morning, and as soon as it was daylight, and I just don't remember the exact time.
Yeah.